There's the big mover of the morning, and that is shares of Alphabet today surging, hitting an all-time high. Tech giant sales and profit beats the street. The ad machine continues to power ahead, a sign its strength in online ads will help offset that potential $5 billion fine out of EU that we heard from regulators last week. Scott, you've written a whole book on FANG, essentially. Yeah. Are you impressed by this quarter?
Their quarter? Well, it's awesome to be a monopoly in a growing economy. You know, in the time it'll take me to do this with my phone, 2 million people will declare their intentions to Google, who can then serve them ads across the entire internet, figuring out how they translate that intention to action, whether it's to take a trip, go to a certain hotel, what car they choose, what jobs they look for. This is just a juggernaut. So am I surprised? No. I'm surprised the government has become so neutered.
Well, my question was, were you impressed, I guess?
Always impressed. They grew the core business 23%, other, which is cloud, basically 36%, and they've done really smart. They call their other bets big bets, which is good bank, bad bank. They've basically said this stuff doesn't work, so don't think about it. We're gonna break it out. But yeah, unbelievable machine that continues to employ a supernova business model.
And 4,000 new hires in the quarter, which is another thing. And Scott, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how this sets Google Alphabet up as a hiring machine vis-a-vis the others in FANG. I mean, if I'm a young engineer and I'm looking at what's hot, Google's looking pretty good vis-a-vis Alphabet or vis-a-vis Facebook or some of these other companies.
Well, Google's second largest recruiter at the school I teach at NYU Stern, and I'll put it back to you guys. Who do you think's number one? Who's the largest recruiter at Stern right now? Google's number two. Who's number one?
Facebook? I don't know.
Good guess. Amazon, number one.
Amazon.
Google grew their hiring 17%, but grew their revenues 23%, which means that they're getting more and more yield out of their human capital.
Interesting. Stephanie, I wonder, are there potentially dark clouds on the horizon with the EU? Not just with this fine. The fine, small potatoes, $5 billion for Google, but small, it's a lot of potatoes.
It was literally a footnote in the release.
It's a lot of potatoes, but they're small. But it's the behavioral issue that's interesting because the EU argues that Google has effectively locked anybody else out of making an Android fork. So, Amazon can make Fire OS, but nobody can adopt it because they also need to use Google's apps. If Google's behavior changes, then others like an Amazon, like a Facebook even, will have the ability to perhaps make Android devices that could get some scale. Is that going to perhaps change the game one way or the other competitively?
Well, of course there are always clouds, there are always risks. I think that a lot of this is going to boil down to consumer behavior. And, when I had an Android phone, I went all Google apps because it just made my life that much easier. And I'm somebody that has a tendency to not want to buy into the monopoly, who doesn't want to, be locked into a walled garden, if you will. And yet, as a consumer, for me, I made a choice on my Android phone to embrace all the Google apps because it just worked seamlessly. And I think that, a lot of it's going to boil down to what the consumers will choose. Google can change its behavior. It can make its platform available to others. But if the consumer wants Google, the consumer is going to go with Google. And that's happened already with search. Nobody uses Bing.
One of the big takeaways of the quarter, though, is the degree to which their investments are starting to pay off. All the sell-side research today talks about early stages of monetization in YouTube and cloud and Maps and Waymo. The monopoly you speak of, is it worth it for the innovation we ostensibly are going to get in 5 or 10 years?
Well, that's the argument, that you need these big companies who have basically replaced government in terms of R&D, and they are incredibly innovative. The question is, we don't know what we're missing because we don't know what other companies would have been started but can't get funding because try and pitch a search company right now to venture capitalists. It's just not going to happen. John, your comment was the operative term, and that is if they change their behavior. And let me ask you guys another question. If you're Google and you're fined $5 billion and in that day your stock goes up, do you change your behavior? Do you change?
It's the threat of 5% of revenue per day of violation going forward, I think, that perhaps gets them to the table. More than $5 billion, a one-time hit. That could be a cost of doing business.
That's a great point. But the argument I would make is that if there's a parking meter in front of your house that costs $100 every 15 minutes, and the fine is 25 cents, and quite frankly, $5 billion looks like it's a quarter to Google when their stock goes up that day, what would you do? And I would bet that you would do the smart thing, and that is you would break the law and continue to lie. And
I would hire somebody to move my car.
There you go.
What's the equivalent of that? That's
for
what
$80.
Google's going to do. Yeah.
But I believe there's no evidence, even with these fines, that these companies won't continue to do the shareholder-driven thing, and that is to continue to lie and break the law.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.